An anecdote before we begin. When I told my seminary classmate that I was going to preach on communal discernment to a group of UUs, she joked that I might as well be proposing a model for world peace in 25 minutes. I told her y'all would sooner riot than let me speak that long. All joking aside, agreeing on a common direction for any community is hard, even when members of that community hold similar perspectives. Just ask my friends in the United Methodist Church who are witnessing firsthand a denominational schism over LGBTQIA inclusion. We don't have a shared theology or shared language here. If I mention God in this pulpit, some of you are going to wince or feel uneasy. What's he doing? But I also know there are some of you who, if I didn't, occasionally, might feel like something is missing. Likewise, the current version of our 6 sources, each of us has our preferences. Now, I've been educated in a Christian seminary, and guess what? I'm really comfortable with source number 4, which is Jewish and Christian teachings. But again, I know that if I lean primarily or wholly on the Bible, some of you appreciate it, some of you tolerate it, and others still of you feel alienated. And I would rather not have that for any of you. So unfortunately, in a community like ours, nobody is going to get all of their needs met every Sunday. Not everything is tailored to one person's preferences. I'm sure you've all felt that at one point or another. This message just wasn't for me today. Or I didn't really enjoy the music. Not today, you didn't say that. And likely this extends to things beyond Sunday morning. So why do you keep coming back here? Week after week after week. Community. Whenever I ask this question, the answer always seems to be community. In another part of the book from which we took our reading today, The Art of Communication by Thich Nhat Hanh, he tells the reader that community and communicate have the same root word, communicare, which means to impart, to share, or to make common. Now, despite our individualistic approach to spirituality, that com word, that com prefix, is important to a lot of what we do around here. Another word which shares this prefix is compassion, which Hahn writes is impossible without first understanding communication. Because compassion means to suffer with. Now, in Eastern traditions, suffering is a very broad word. It really encompasses the whole of human struggle. And compassion calls us to empathize with all of it. Now, despite some linguistic drift, there's yet another word critical to what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist, which shares it: covenant. The UUA defines it as a solemn promise, or a solemn agreement, or a promise of the heart. Now, covenant is part of our modern religious vernacular because of the Jewish tradition, wherein it was a promise between 2 parties marked by sacrifice. It cost both parties something, but they see the value in binding themselves to one another as worth the price. We will each suffer a little, and both come out better in the end. Now, as much as I've highlighted our differences, I feel as though I can speak for all of us when I say it has been a joy to watch this congregation grow over these 6 or so months since we've moved into our new home. And I feel confident saying that because I know we are a congregation that is committed to both our personal growth and the growth of our community. But I want us to sit with what growth means. Growth, first of all, means change. And now change is inevitable, so we had best make the best of it. That's why we've been preaching on it for the last 2 months. But change also means difference, and difference often means discomfort. For a community to thrive, it cannot stagnate. Rather, it goes through cycles of change, adaptation, and rest. This is the process of discernment in a nutshell. How will we respond to the inevitable change? Were that process ever to cease, it would bode very poorly for the community. There's this ancient thought experiment called the Ship of Theseus. It asks this question about a hypothetical ship. After years of use and repair, eventually none of it is original. It's all been replaced. Is it still the same ship? I'm inclined to say yes. That there's some intrinsic identity imparted by time and association, a certain thingness. And so it is with communities. Every new member strengthens our sails and reinforces our rudder. We might sail a little differently. The ride might be unfamiliar, but that's what we need to stay afloat. And we need to sail differently because we are in the midst of a sea change in our movement. See what I did there? What guides us when we are re-examining those things that are supposed to guide us? What undergirds us while we look to rework our principles? Ostensibly, it's the 6 sources, but as I have already mentioned, we all weigh those differently. And what's more, we're also reworking our language around those sources. So I suspect there must be something much deeper, much more fundamental to what keeps us together. Something at the root. Now, Unitarian Universalism is a living tradition, which means that we never close the book on Revelation. Not just from things yet to come, but also from new ways of understanding the familiar. With that in mind, it seems very UU to me to attempt to put 2 voices in dialogue across time and tradition. So with your blessing, I will lean a bit on the Bible and add St. Paul to Thich Nhat Hanh to hopefully answer our questions. Ambitious, I know. So almost 2,000 years ago, Emperor Claudius temporarily ousted the Jewish residents of Rome from the city. Now, one consequence of this was that the nascent Roman Church ceased to be culturally Jewish. It continued to grow, but now Roman citizens were the dominant force. When the Jews were allowed to return, they were now the minority voice, and they felt uncomfortable that the community no longer kept their dietary laws or practiced the Sabbath. And what's worse, they were getting mocked and excluded by those in power for wanting to reintroduce those things. They needed a place to feel at home. Now, Paul excoriates the Roman Christians. He points out that they had all the power in the situation, the freedom to move about society as they saw fit, and instead they used their freedom to make disempowered people feel even less welcome. This was especially important because Paul had a communal theology of salvation, not individual. Life is found in the community. A message I think we can agree with even though our theology may be different. So at the core of Paul's ethic is this idea of welcome. The church was supposed to be a place for everyone. If you really wanted to be there, you should be allowed to be there. It was really that simple. There was very little theology in his argument beyond this idea that God has already welcomed them. What gives you the right to do otherwise? In our reading today, Thich Nhat Hanh wrote that the foundation of love is understanding, and that first of all means understanding suffering. In other words, having compassion. Listening when someone says they are hurting. Exactly what the Romans had failed to do. Now, what I find fascinating about this passage is that despite using different language, Paul is basically talking about the power of privilege. And he puts 99% of the responsibility on those he calls the strong in this situation. I think the advice he gives is pretty broadly applicable, including to our question of discernment. First and foremost, he says, if you have power, it falls on you to make sacrifices for the sake of those who don't, in order that they feel welcome. Tweak the language. Play some new songs. Don't respond to correction from a place of embarrassment or ego. Second, pursue peace and mutual upbuilding. You want a place to feel safe and stable, able to grow and to find meaning. So do they, even if they go about it in a different way. Help make it happen. Third, and this is the one where everyone holds some responsibility, be honest about what's important to you, and don't let anyone slander it. Should that be at odds with someone else, solve it with communication, with covenant, not by ignoring it and not by attacking them. But should any party not be willing to put in the work, to not extend a hand, Paul places the responsibility on whoever first refused to be welcoming, and that's the tiebreaker. That's what prevents this from being abused. If a person's need for feeling welcome are themselves contingent on exclusion, they are not of the right spirit. Today, we would call that the paradox of tolerance. Hahn writes that listening to suffering is an essential ingredient for generating understanding and love. When we listen to and acknowledge suffering, from the smallest faux pas to the greatest injustice, we create welcome. We develop love and understanding. This, I believe, is the measure by which we test the spirit of a community and of a movement when all else is stripped away. So I encourage you to reflect on what really matters to you. Is it language, music, or theology? Is it activism, expression, or events? Does it require that you are always at the center, that everything is to your liking, that you're never corrected or critiqued? Test your own spirit, lest it get in the way of those who simply need someone to make a space for them. Welcome, or hospitality, is a virtue in nearly every culture and tradition the world over. So I'm glad that we've invested so much energy into our radical welcome team, which is always looking for new members, I might add. Do any of you know the etymology of the word radical? If you can't tell by now, I'm a big word nerd, kind of a side effect of 3 years of theological education. So it comes from the Latin word radix, which, hint, we also get the word radish from. Yes, the vegetable. It means root. To be radical is to get to the root of the matter. So good work, UCA. You hit the nail on the head with that one. At the root of it all is the virtue of welcome. Because, and this is the last one, I swear, the very word religion means to rejoin, reconnect, re-ligament that which has been severed. So as we move forward, into a as of yet undetermined future. May that be religion for all of us, beyond theology, belief, creed, or language. Every act of welcome is an act of worship. Of who or what remains up to you.